For circular shading, first of all, make sure that your pencil is sharp. However, you don't use the tip. Use the flat side of your pencil, moving it in a circular or oval motion. Overlap each oval and move your pencil in different directions to keep the transition smooth. To darken it, increase the pressure, push harder. And to lighten it, decrease the pressure. This method takes practice but allows for great control. For big areas, lay your pencil completely on its side. For smaller detail areas, you want to use a sharper angle, but the exact same technique. Hatching and cross-hatching use line to create value. So the single parallel lines are called hatching, and when you cross those lines over each other, we call it cross-hatching. And of course, the closer your lines are together, the darker it gets. And the more you cross over your cross-hatching, the darker it's going to get. It's also a good idea to curve your hatching lines to emphasize form. For instance, if we're drawing a circular form, we can curve those lines around the form to help emphasize volume. Stippling uses tiny dots to create value. The more dots you have and the closer together they are, the darker it gets. Keep the pencil close to the page for maximum control. If you're doing this properly, it should not be loud. Stippling is obviously very time consuming, but sometimes it's a good technique to use to layer on top of other shading techniques in order to add texture or detail. Smudging needs to be done correctly in order to be effective. First, make sure that you lay down enough graphite. There needs to be something on the page before you can smudge it. When you're ready to smudge, it's best to use a blending stump or a tissue rather than your finger, as oils from your skin can damage the paper or create unexpected effects. Move the blending stump in a circular motion, starting usually with the darkest area and easing up on your pressure a little bit as you move towards the lighter areas. And what smudging will do is it will help to fill those little gaps in the tooth of the paper to make everything look very smooth. Now what you'll notice is that smudging destroys contrast. It makes the light areas darker and the dark areas lighter than they were before. So when you are done smudging, you'll likely have to go back with your shading pencil to reinforce the darkest shadows to make sure that they're as dark as they need to be. And then take a kneaded eraser and lift off your highlights and bright areas to make sure they're as light as they need to be. You'll also probably have a little bit of cleanup to do because smudging tends to get a little bit messy. And we don't want areas to be blurry that are not supposed to be blurry. Lifting off uses an eraser to lift out light areas from darker tones. Kneaded erasers work very well for this because they don't smudge the graphite. So for instance, if you lost your highlight, you can lift it out. You can also lift off with a regular eraser, but it does take a little bit more force and may smudge the graphite a little bit more. The electric eraser works very well for this technique as well, to the point where you can actually draw and create textures with it. Graphite shaving works well for toning large areas quickly. Take a dark pencil or graphite block and then use a knife or scissors to shave the graphite into a powder on top of a sheet of scrap paper. please try not to breathe in that dust. You can then apply the powder using a paintbrush or a blending stump. For frottage, you're going to need to find something with a pronounced texture, such as this ladybug stepping stone, and place it underneath your drawing paper. Your next step is to put your pencil on its side and rub it sideways over the texture. This will pick up the textures of the subject underneath. The impressed line technique works well for creating fine, light details. You'll need a ballpoint pen and a sheet of translucent paper or tracing paper. It's important to have a soft pad of paper under your drawing, and then you place the tracing paper on top. And what you do next is you take your pen and, pressing very hard, you make the marks that you would like to appear as white in your drawing. And by pressing hard, you're going to be denting the paper underneath. Then you take the tracing paper off and grab your shading pencil, and you're going to flatten it out and rub it sideways over top of the area. And the graphite's going to go on the surface of the paper, but it will not go into those dents you made.